If you are looking for an alternative exploration of the Vietnam War and how other people experienced it, most notably how women may have experienced it, then today's book just might be for you. Today I will be discussing The Women by Kristin Hannah. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and today we will be taking a look at a book that is bit of a gut punch. I will tell you now. It is a book that is trying to explore the consequences of the Vietnam War, and it is really looking at a lot of different things. And just to give you the bare bones premise of the book, it tells the story of a young girl named Fran. She goes by Frankie McGrath. And at the very beginning of the book, her brother is going off to war. And supposedly he has a pretty cushy job in the military. He is going to be on a naval ship, so there's an expectation that he will not really see any major combat and that he'll only be gone for his tour of duty and that he'll come back home. But Frankie is very aware of the fact that in her family there is a tendency to elevate and to valorize all the people that served in war. There's even a room in her house that is the hero's room, and that, of course, is only going to be for men. And so she finds herself thinking about how she could be involved in the war in Vietnam. Of course, she cannot sign up to be a soldier, but she is training as a nurse. So as soon as she finishes, she goes and she signs up to be a nurse in Vietnam. She actually has to go to like 3 different branches because each branch says that you have to have so many years of service and you're not ready. And then finally, she does find the one branch that will let her sign up, which is the Army, if I recall correctly. And so she is going to go and serve as a nurse, and she is going to immediately be surprised at how everybody reacts when they find out she signs up to be a nurse in Vietnam. Her parents are not impressed. They do not think that this will make her a hero like her brother. Instead, they are so mad that she is going to essentially throw her life away. At least that's the perspective that they have. And that is one of the things that she is going to be constantly fighting throughout the rest of the book. And sadly, it is right around this moment that you find out that her brother did die in combat. So it is at this moment that she has to make a decision. Is she still going to go to Vietnam, or is she going to somehow try to get out of it? And she feels all the more conviction that she needs to go to Vietnam because she clearly still has this idealized reason for going to Vietnam. And a good deal of the book is illustrating how her experience in Vietnam is going to quickly relieve her of any of the grand notions of why she thought we would be in Vietnam. Of course, it talks about all the gore and guts and all the many different issues that she is going to experience. On top of that, people's relationship with her, not just on a romantic level, but the fellow nurses and all the other casualties, all the men in Vietnam that are being injured. And on top of that, she's hearing numbers and statistics from the US government, and she is saying that they are simply not true. She can see that more people are coming into her hospital alone than the numbers of what they're saying are being killed. So she is quickly becoming disillusioned with the US government's justification for being in Vietnam. However, that is not the main purpose of the book. The main purpose of the book is to talk about when she comes back home and the way she's treated when she comes back home. And the discussion of being a baby killer and being spit on, some of the tropes that we usually encounter when we talk about the Vietnam War, and just how angry the public was about the Vietnam War and the idea of the draft, and of course this division within society over people that served and people that didn't, and the fact that she would say that she served, and people would say, well, there are no women in Vietnam, and she'd say, well, I was a nurse, and then there'd be this like discomfort of people saying, well, I don't think that's necessarily counts. And it's just then her struggling with readjusting and all of it being connected to how young she was when she went. And then, of course, all the flashbacks, all the things that are usually associated with people going to war. And the problem that she has as someone that does not have quite the same respect in many regards. She has zero respect. Many people disrespect her for having served in Vietnam. And so she is also trying to struggle with where she fits in society. She has a hard time holding down a job. She was going to suffer from alcoholism. And so the whole point of this book is to highlight not just the struggles of the Vietnam War, but specifically to emphasize people that may have served that you don't associate with the Vietnam War. In her case, women in particular, but really anyone that becomes associated with the war that we don't necessarily think of because they weren't a soldier per se, can very much still suffer many of the consequences and much of the PTSD, and that's clearly one of the things that she is experiencing. That's the heart of this book. It covers a pretty long time period, and so she actually goes and comes back from Vietnam probably by at least the halfway point, if not even a little sooner than that in the book. And so much of the book is really a discussion of her adjustment and her relationships with individuals and how she feels like people take advantage of her and of course her relationship with society and the fact that she feels like she did a service and many people don't feel the same. And that's the premise of the book. I have to say that I mean, it's a challenging book to read. There is lots of gore and guts. There is some romance in it. However, a big part of the book is her being very disappointed in the way people treat her, expectations, and people that lied to her. And a lot of that is going to continue to play out throughout the whole book. And so, really, she never even has a significant long-term relationship in the book because of consequences of having served in Vietnam and just her inability to properly adjust. And again, because of people lying to her. And so that's a big part of the book of trying to illustrate just how much she's struggling. I mean, there's a lot of different things I could discuss about this book and the challenges that it's trying to emphasize. And the fact that it chooses the Vietnam War is so interesting to me for a lot of reasons. I grew up in the 80s and the 90s in which people were trying to either forget the Vietnam War or in some cases try to re-win it somehow. I mean, that's essentially what Rambo is, a single individual trying to go back and win back some glory for us. And I would say even now, that's all the more interesting in the wake of the end of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so it becomes a real question of how exactly should we remember this war and how should we remember the people that fought or participated in this war. And that's going to be a real point of contention for a lot of people. And that's going to be something that you have to figure out on your own, your own beliefs in regards to how something like this, not only how it should be remembered, but how it should be, whether there should be any kind of glorification of it or any other controversies around a war like this that highlight a whole lot of problems within a society and a society's relationship with its government and of course war itself. All of that is stuff that's being explored in this. I would say most of that exploration is quite well done. However, I will say that most of that is being well done. I will say there's a few things that I didn't love about the book. These are just little things, so for the most part, these weren't glaring issues to me. First and foremost, and I've only read two Kristin Hannah books, I would say that at least of the two that I've read, she has a tendency to have a pretty large time frame. I don't love that. I mean, I don't immediately dislike a book because it covers 20 years, but I will say that I, I prefer that your story is a little more compact in terms of the time period, but in this case, since she's trying to consider the consequences and she's trying to show just how long lasting they are, she of course is going to cover a couple decades in this book. So that's one thing that I didn't love, but it seems to be Kristin Hannah's style. There is a big discussion of the POWs and the MIA, which I I have recently learned that this is a really fraught conversation because this was a significant part of the image of the Vietnam War were prisoners of war and people missing in action. However, in contrast to past wars, it was not any more dramatic. On the contrary, we actually had fewer POWs and MIA, but it has become at least a part of some conspiracy theories. And again, like I said, I mean, that was the whole point of Rambo, was to show some guy going back to Vietnam to go save some prisoners that almost likely did not really exist at that time period. That's not a huge part of it, and she doesn't dive into the conspiracy theories about that, but it is one of those things that I have just recently discovered could be a point of issue for some people that explore the Vietnam War or study the Vietnam War and the consequences of it and its legacy in American history. So who would I say this is for? You got to be willing to explore your emotions and to consider how people are treated when they serve in not just military, but when they serve in a wholly unpopular war, which is essentially the lasting legacy of the Vietnam War. And you also have to be open to exploring that for someone that is going to have a much less traditional experience as a nurse. So someone that is going to see all the blood and guts and all the wounds, yet she is not going to have the same access to the healthcare and the benefits and anything else that most soldiers are going to get. And of course, she does not get nearly the same respect of being a veteran as most people will, at least eventually. Again, the fact that it's the Vietnam War is its own complication of itself. If you're open to those explorations, then this is a good book for you. Who wouldn't I recommend this for? If you're hoping to get a lot of experiences out of this book, then it's not going to be for you because it is really only going to follow Frankie. There's a couple other periphery characters, but it's really just one person's experience. And that could be something that is just a little misleading based off the title. And if you're not interested in a book that talks about war but doesn't glorify it, then this isn't going to be a book for you. If you're looking for something that has a happy, tidy ending, this isn't going to be for you either. Not to say that she doesn't find some peace and some resolution in her life, but it's definitely not going to be some they lived happily ever after type thing. Of course, I'd like to know what you guys think about this book, or if you've read any other books by her, I'd love to know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.